alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, author of science fiction and fantasy, and I know I should plug more books at the beginning, but I'm not going to. And with me is a new guest to the podcast, Nicole Fanning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a habit of this, but I actually did get to read the beginning of your book. I don't, it's just the first sample on Amazon, but it's got some compelling stuff in it, I've got to say. So tell people a little bit about that and the who you are.
So I'm an author of darker romance novel. Catalyst is a mafia romance, and it's basically the story of a mafia lord in Chicago. He's a generational mafia lord. He's the last in a long line of dons. And he's actually what is called the Don Supreme of their mafia. So there's multiple mafia clans in Chicago. His is the most powerful, so therefore they kind of manage all the others. And it's his story mixed with him meeting she's basically just a girl next door. She's a nurse, and she is in town, and she is staying at his hotel. Because on top of being a mafia lord, he's also a hotelier. So he owns a list of luxury hotels across the world. And she is staying at his hotel for her cousin's wedding. And she is only there for a week, but it's a little bit of a difficult situation for her because her ex-fiance is the best man. That's her cousin's best friend. So she is kind of forced in this proximity, and her family really doesn't know the situation around why they're no longer together. So she's kind of being pushed in the direction to get back together with her ex-fiance, and she has, no way to know that she is going to kind of stumble into the path of this really powerful mafia lord. And I'll give you a little bit. So she ends up saving his daughter from a kidnapping. And Jackson, who kind of lives in this world where nothing is done for free, nothing is done just out of the goodness of your heart, really doesn't know how to process this. He can't register, why someone would just do the right thing without an ulterior motive. Because, he's, the kind of shadowy bad, I wouldn't call them bad men. Well, yes, I take that back. I would call them bad men who keep worse men in check.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he meets her, he's kind of a jerk to her right off the bat. And he just doesn't understand it. He thinks, that either she's a spy or she's from another mafia family. There's no way that this pretty girl just stumbled into his life, saved his daughter, and isn't expecting anything in return. And so he's kind of a jerk. And she, who again is feeling really insecure because she's about to be thrust into this week-long kind of torturous situation with her ex-fiance, is just not having his crap. And so she gives it right back to him and is like, nope, you're not going to treat me like this. And again, this very handsome, powerful mafia don is just not prepared for someone to stand up to him and push back, and then also just not be totally enamored with him. She just can't stand him. So that kind of creates this desire for him to be like, well, I need to know more about her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so kind of the theory and the reason it's called Catalyst is because each of them becomes a catalyst for the other in a different way. So for Jackson, he has suffered some tragedy. He obviously lives this kind of shadowy, mysterious, criminal life. And his walls are just constantly up. He's a single dad. He's a widower. And Natalie, for him, comes in and just kind of crashes through those walls. And so it's about him kind of having to immediately deal with how he's feeling. And for Natalie, I would say that she's a quieter personality, but I would not say that she is weak in any way. As we see, she stopped the kidnapping. She, put herself in that line of fire. She is what I would call a strong, quiet force to be reckoned with. And what she's struggling with is to not only kind of stand up for herself and come into her own strength, but also to move on from the baggage of the past. So Jackson, for her, kind of becomes that catalyst, not to change her or give her something that she didn't have, but just to kind of push her to realize what she already had. So that's kind of why I chose the name Catalyst. And for the whole series, I based it off of the 4 stages of a fire.
Yeah.
On the curve of a fire, you would have a catalyst, and then, that would come into the situation, create a reaction, but then leave, which is foreshadowing, by the way.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a foreshadowing.
And then ignite, or the ignition, would be when that spark actually takes off. And then Flashpoint, which will be the third and final book of this series, is when the fire burns the hottest. So, like, kind of when all of the shit hits the fan. So, and then I do have a 4th book planned, but that 4th book is going to be called Embers, and it's actually going to change perspective. So books 1 through 3 are from Jackson and Natalie's perspective, and the perspective alternates each chapter.
Yeah, I noticed that the first person perspective is also interesting because they're alternating first. Do you see that a lot in romance? I haven't read a ton of romance lately, or really ever.
It depends. I chose 2 perspectives because I've read books where there was like 3 or 4 or 5 perspectives, and it starts to get a little confusing as to who's talking. Unless you have very distinct,
narration voices.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. If there's a very distinct, pattern for each of those. So I just chose 2 because I felt like it was easier, and I felt like it would be interesting for the reader to get both, that softer, inquisitive energy from Natalie, but then get that kind of like, I want to burn the world down at like angry energy from Jackson at times. And I also wanted the book to be more of a mafia thriller with romance than to just be labeled a mafia romance. So even though the story kind of focuses on their relationship, I wrote it so that it would appeal to both male and female readers. That opening definitely appealed to me. I mean, I thought it was very interesting. And then the fact that it was, though it does take me back because I've never written a multiple first person book actually, but I have written a book that had a first person point of view and a bunch of third person point of views in it, and that's almost weirder to people, I think. But I have heard a little bit of feedback on how third person point of view is becoming, I think, harder for people to read. I think. Well, and maybe it's just in like the romance genre because that's kind of that might be all the circles that I'm in at present, but they tend to like that first person perspective. And like with Jackson and Natalie, I think it's nice for the reader to get, Natalie wondering what Jackson's thinking about, or Jackson wondering what Natalie's thinking about, and then we get to alternate. Because I felt like when I read like 50 Shades of Grey, which I did read 50 Shades of Grey, and I'm not going to recommend or not recommend it. But I remember thinking like, I got really just, I don't know what the word is. I think full of listening to Anna's inner rhetoric. And so when I wrote this one, I was like, I think it would be more interesting and fun for the reader to hear Jackson's rhetoric, because he is one of those men that think 3 times and speak once. So, whereas he has his loyal alpha squad is what he calls, which I have gotten feedback from a couple of readers who have said that it was very, like, my story was different because a lot of times in a mafia romance, you only have one alpha. And then everyone else is kind of a beta. But what I did was I created Jackson as like an alpha. And then underneath him, the reason he's so successful is that he has a team of 6 alpha squad. And they will eventually have their own books in my series too.
Okay, so you've got a pretty big series planned here in some ways.
Dude, it's going to be 11 books.
Good. It's exciting, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be, to me it was more about like I wanted to play with the different perspectives.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get some of those Alpha Squad stories, wanted to kind of play with that a little bit. But I think it's fun because You can hear Jackson's very distinct sarcasm. He's very short. He is what most readers would call kind of like an alpha hole. He's like an alpha plus an asshole.
Oh, okay. See, I wasn't familiar with that term, actually. No.
Yeah, so he is definitely that personality, and he's used to just getting whatever he wants. And Natalie is just... She's already dealt with this with her ex-fiance being a narcissist, and she's like, gotten over that. So she's kind of at this like, I don't have time for your crap, bud, like stage. And he just finds that absolutely fascinating, and I mean, he's smitten. So the book one is really about him trying to woo her, and the challenges that come with that, and then obviously learning about his life and the truth. So yeah, I'm sorry if I went off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. Though I do have a question for you.
Sure,
because we do talk a lot about writing on this show. I mean, I'm not sure if I prepped you for this, but when we talk about, but I actually do have this question because the series I'm writing right now is called Twisted Gods, and it is about, and it's fantasy, but there's a strong romantic thread to it, especially the first 2 books, which are, I keep saying the second book is going to be out anytime, and by the time this episode drops, it should damn well be out. But anyway,
that's awesome.
Because it's already written. I'm just editing it as of this recording, and I have a few books in the can. I mean, not books, podcast episodes. Jeez, I'm confused. I do not keep books in the can generally. So anyway, books don't go in cans. They go in drawers, I guess. They go in drawers. Not even. Anyway, folders maybe. So the basic idea here, this series is like, but it's actually interesting what you said, because my series, like, it does alternate points of view now. At first, it was going to be mostly the guy's point of view, but then I'm like, oh, no, the female lead needs a lot of chapters, especially in book 2. She gets like almost half the book is from her point of view now, and right. When book 1 was like maybe 2/3 or even 3/4 from the man's point of view. And I just thought that was interesting. I mean, though probably not ever going to qualify as a romance, especially if the people if romance readers aren't enjoying third person. But whatever. There's also a ton of action and stuff. It's a heroic fantasy series, whatever.
Right.
But my question is more along the lines of, what do you do if you have what would you do if you had like a strong characters, but you don't really feel the voice immediately? Or does that just not happen with you? Do you have to dig for the voice ever?
So I am a neurodivergent writer. And so for me, what worked was, one, I decided to keep things easy on myself. I would, like I said, just have the 2 perspectives. But I would also map out the entire plot for the entire story for all 3 books. And I would have that master. Like, I at one point I had pages all over this room that I'm sitting in. Because I wanted everything to kind of interconnect and have, the reader finding little pieces and clues. So I wrote all of those. But then individually I took each book and I broke it down. And I did what I call my skeleton. So I would say, okay, I'm going to say 45 chapters. And I did with Catalyst, I think I set out to do 40 chapters and I ended up having 45 because as I was writing, I was like, you know what, this needs a little bit more expansion here, or this would be a little bit more fun. But I did at least have the skeleton or the spine of what, and I mapped out what I wanted each chapter to be about. Just so that it was, as much as my characters want to run off and go in whatever direction they want to go in, that way I can rein them back in. But what I did was when I mapped out what I wanted each chapter to be about, that allowed me as a neurodivergent writer to kind of pick what I felt like writing about.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I could jump around because I would find, like, if I was driving home from the grocery store, I would find that I might be in, like, a fight scene with my male character in my head and see it all happening and be like, I have to write this because I'm feeling it. And I am, again, like, as a neurodivergent writer, like, if I'm feeling it, like, that's a different quality writing, than if you're not feeling it. And I found that when I was trying to go sequentially, like when I've started other books in the past that have never seen the light of day, I would get really discouraged when I would write 10 chapters and then that 11th chapter is just something that was really difficult or I wasn't feeling it. And I'd be like, well, I'll just put it off. and then it would just never come to fruition. So when I did this, and I was allowed to write chapters 1 through 10, but then also go write chapter 27, or then write 17, and then all I had to do was, when I got to those kind of surrounding chapters, just kind of smooth them out and make them flow. So that helped me, because you're right. Sometimes you just don't hear that character's voice in your head. Like, you can see where you want them to go, but the conversation they're supposed to be having, the mood they're supposed to be in, you're just not there. And I found that it made it easy, because it took that pressure off of me to follow a very rigid, process through this writing. And it made it a lot easier on me. Now, with book 2, that went a little bit easier, but I still did some jumping around, because, again, I would just have a scene in my head, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go write that scene. But I think, like, my advice would just be, like, don't force it, like, write what you're feeling about, and then it will surprise you. Because the other thing that I do when I struggle with that is, I have a writing habit where every single day I will write for at least an hour. It doesn't matter if I'm with my family. It doesn't matter if I have a migraine. It doesn't matter, if I'm really, really busy. I saw it on a YouTube video from a YouTuber that has been very influential in my life, and I wish I could remember her name, because I'm saying she's so influential and I can't remember who she was. But she said that writer's block isn't real. Undisciplined writing is. So that if you are creating that writing habit where every day you're writing something, it keeps you in that zone every single day. And even if you write, like, and I found that there were, like, I would write chapter 17 because I would see it in my brain. Yeah. And then when I would get to it again, I'd be like, oof, no, we're going to rewrite this. And even if you had to rewrite it 3 times, the process of rewriting it 3 times made it 3 times better.
Absolutely, yeah. And it reminds me a lot. Sorry to cut in there. No. But it reminds me a lot. It reminds me a lot of this book. This one particular part from this book by James Scott Bell about how to write pulp fiction. And
love pulp fiction.
Yeah, I like how to write pulp. But in this book, he said this author James Scott Bell, he's talking about pulp fiction, but he also says, like, if you really want to, he has this section in there about how to sharpen up your prose. But one of the things he says is, like, if you try to write, maybe sometimes you're only going to pick one good sentence out of an entire chapter. That's happened to me before. I've written whole chapters, cut them all, saved the good bits. And put them in somewhere else, because there's a lot of the time, and honestly, I've run into that problem a lot recently, where I'm like, oh, this chapter's dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. You were saying, like, I got to just smooth out the edges and replace this, or just jump over it, basically, because it's not happening.
I've entirely chopped sections of my book because I would say that I love every single part of the 2 books I've published. And if I didn't love it, it wasn't going in. And if it didn't have a purpose, it wasn't going in.
Hell yeah.
And that's just something where, like, that's tough to do, because you did write it, you put the effort in. But at the same time, if your reader is going to get distracted because they're seeing you repeat something you've already said in the previous chapter for filler, they'd rather you just didn't. They'd rather that chapter be smaller. They'd rather, kind of get to the point.
Books aren't by the that's why you don't buy books by the word count, really. I mean, books aren't charged. If you're gonna get a lot of story, what are you complaining about if it's fewer words? It's actually a good thing, because in a way, I know there are some readers out there who just want to be immersed in the book forever, right? They want to read the 1,000-page Brandon Sanderson book or whatever. But I'm personally, I'm realizing that my preference is for shorter books, because I don't have all that time to read. My eyes have to be on a screen typing while I type words a lot of the day. So if I'm going to read a book, it needs to get to the point. So if I write books that are like that, that's actually much more up my own alley, and it helps me a lot. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But so cutting the stuff that you don't love, I mean, that's I threw up a finger when you said that, because, like, that's awesome. Doing the thing, I mean, because if you don't love the part of the book, you're going to end up with parts of the book that are boring, basically. Yeah, exactly. You can't be the person who likes it less than anyone. If you like it less than the maximum amount, you can imagine liking this part. Oof. That's a red flag. And even and that might sound like a high standard, but it's
Nope.
an important one. And there's no beating it.
I've had feedback from my readers that Catalyst and Ignite kind of go at like 100 miles per hour from the get-go. And I'm like, that's exactly what I was aiming for. I like to be entertained. So I definitely I'll have like a sweet scene. But I also don't want my reader to get too comfortable. So, I mean, like, you're kind of walking that line because I don't want my reader to have to drink an entire bottle of wine to get through my book. But I also don't want them falling asleep or getting, lost in a chapter. So, again, like something that you have that is either important for the story or it's entertaining. So there'll be a lot of times that, things are starting to be calm. And it kind of happens really big in book 2. There's a massive gut punch, and it was an intentional gut punch, and it's right after everything's cozy and fun. And there's just, it hits you right in the guts.
Yours is an evil writing talent, I can tell.
A little bit.
A little bit of evil in there, yeah.
I want my readers to feel something, whether it's the excitement, whether it's the beginning of like you said, the beginning of the book where we're introduced to the assassin. We don't know who this assassin is. We don't know why the assassin is there. And the assassin is kind of observing Jackson and Natalie 4 days after the beginning of the book. So it's kind of like so the book, does that flash forward where we see what's about to happen. And then it goes, to where the story starts between the two of them. But it's kind of fun because later in the book, you get a scene from Natalie's perspective at the same time the assassin was there. So I've had a couple of people that were like, oh my God, it just hit me that I just read the chapter where the assassin was sitting on the bench and watching that take place. And I want them to feel, either that crazy excitement that Natalie's feeling when she's rescuing the kid, or, the emotional kind of frustration she's having when she's fighting with her mother about getting back together with her ex. Or, Jackson, who is struggling with, like, maybe I should just never talk to this girl again and let her go, but, like, I'm really attracted to her. So whatever it is, I want my reader to feel that. And sadly, part of that is a little sadistic in book 3 or book 2.
It sounds like there's some of that in all the books. Judging, there's a little bit of it there. You got to intersperse that kind of thing, though.
There's definitely a plot twist in books 1 and 2. I kind of feel like and it's funny because I don't like a cliffhanger. Like, when I say I don't like a cliffhanger, I will never be upset with an author for a cliffhanger. But it will make me be like, oh, you got me with the cliffhanger if the second book isn't out yet. Which is kind of why I rushed. I didn't want to say I rushed, but I very
hurried.
much...
Yeah, it took your time in a hurry.
And got book 2 out was because I knew that book 1 ends on a cliffhanger. Book 2 ends on a cliffhanger of a different kind. Like, book 1 is the cliffhanger with the couple. It's very evident that they still care about each other, but like a catalyst that comes into the situation and then has a reason to step away for a second. That's, kind of what happens. Yeah. And, book 2 kind of ends on less of a emotional cliffhanger with a couple. They're solidified, they're secure. But there's a huge plot twist and a bomb dropped at the end. Like, I would say the end of book 2, chapters 40 through 45, which are the last 5, it is like boom, 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 boom. Like, you get comfortable and you get hit again and you get hit again. And I did promise that book 3 will have a happy ending. But books 1 and 2, I'm sorry for the emotional roller coaster. We're on it together.
Sorry, not sorry. Anyway.
Definitely.
But no, that sounds like a fun series. A fun way to... And honestly, I really do enjoy... I go on about Michael Moorcock a fair amount lately. And, we're getting on toward that part of the show where I talk about reading. Or we talk about reading. But, like... in this book of interviews with the author Michael Moorcock, he's this classic, he authors some classic heroic fantasy novels from back in the day, from the 60s and 70s, and beyond, I'm sure. I've only been looking back at the early stuff currently, because I'm not educated in this guy until recently. But there's this book of interviews with him, where he's being interviewed by another author, and and it's just a transcript of the interview. And in one of them, he talks about how, I think this is the one where he wants a major event every 4 pages. Like, stuff's got to happen all the time in these books.
Yep.
You can't stop doing stuff. And I mean, and it's partially just the kind of books he was writing, that it'd be, very similar to a pulp novel where it's like, somebody just has to come, like, I think it was Raymond Chandler, somebody like that. It's like, if the book gets slow, have somebody come through the door with a gun. It's like, you just got to do it sometimes.
Yep.
Sometimes you got to spice things up. And that's metaphorical, or in some sense. It could be literal if it's like a detective novel, but it can be metaphorical too. Yeah.
It makes tons of sense for like mine with like a mafia novel, where there's a threat at them every 5 seconds. And we kind of see, I said that like Jackson is the Don Supreme. He manages the other mafias. We learn a little bit about that mafia history. We learn more about it in book 2. But in book 2, there is a scene where there's just a bad guy. He's not a bad guy in the mafia. He's not related to the main plot. But there is a situation where the mafia is involved with this bad guy. And he's just a really bad person, and the mafia is called in to kind of deal with it. And it's kind of one of those things where we see that there are threats around them all the time. The FBI is lurking. There's just bad guys like this that, in my definition of the mafia, the explanation for it is a little bit different. And that is that the mafia kind of, in my book, their job is to give you the choice to do whatever you want. So the government obviously has certain activities and things that they've deemed illegal, prostitution, drugs, those kinds of things. The mafia believes you should have that choice. And so they provide those things to you. And they also provide a service to the government and the political parties that are in power. And it's kind of how Jackson describes it as an ecosystem. In order to have organized government, like, programs like the police department, drug rehab programs, all those things that, keep our officers employed, you need crime. But you need a manageable level of crime. So, for example, like a mayor has an arrangement with the mafia to keep a handle on the crime, to make it so that they can keep the police employed, but it also looks like the mayor is getting things done. That is, keeping things going. So that's kind of how they've survived, is that it's a predator and prey situation. Like, you can't have the predator without the prey. And if you suddenly, Jackson says in the book, like, you could have, if you wanted to, you could have all the streets cleaned up in 6 months flat. Completely cleaned up, squeaky clean, if you really wanted to. But then what would you do? Then, you'd have all of these officers employed and they wouldn't have anything to do, so you'd be letting them go, so unemployment would go, and then it would create a bigger level of chaos. So kind of keeping, so that's kind of what they do. And, it's just a very practical approach to the mafia, and kind of what they do. And so the book is all about choices. And Jackson says it, Natalie says it. It's about choosing whatever destiny you want for yourself, and the result or the ramifications of those choices.
Sounds like a lot of fun, and it is. And I can say it reads well too. I mean, even though I've heard there might be a new edition coming down the line, I think the current edition reads pretty well. If it reads really well. Actually, it's very enjoyable. But anyway. So
we did talk about that there's an edited version that's coming out, lessons learned as an author. Edit your books and have someone edit your books.
Definitely. Just to put it in brief, because we're almost out of time here, but it is but as for this show, we are basically out of time, so
sorry.
No, it's okay, Nicole. You're here to talk. You talked, and it's awesome. I'm happy. I was happy to listen, and I'm happy to interject every now and then too.
You had mentioned about reading books that we're reading.
Yeah. What have you been reading lately? Let's.
So I actually, it's up on my shelf. But I actually just read a motorcycle romance by a friend of mine. And I've never actually read motorcycle romance before, so this was my first. But hers was a little bit of a different take on it too, where like the main female character, she's like witchy. And so that's like it's not like I wouldn't say it's.
But that's just kind of her one of her quirks, though.
Yeah, it's a part of her character. It isn't like a main part of the plot, but it just makes it different because, again, like mafia romance, it's kind of a lot of rinse and repeat. So anything you can do that separates it makes it really interesting for the reader, because they obviously know that they like motorcycle romance. So this is just a little bit different. And hers was really good. I know that she is working on a book too. I think there's a 2-book series going to be total. Maybe it's 3, but it's called Savior. And I can give you the details. It's like Savior by Jennifer Saviano, but that's my most recent read. That it was like the only thing I read while I was publishing the second book.
Yeah. And so as for me, I've been reading. Like I said, I just recently finished Sailor on the Seas of Fate by Michael Moorcock. That's the second book in his Elric series. But I also have been reading Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury, and that's a fascinating book. I've heard people criticize it before as, like, being a little too... well, definitely Myrtle Lafferty talks about it sometimes, has talked about it on her podcast in the past, about how it makes her feel like how he it kind of hurts when an author like Bradbury will go on about how you need to be in love with writing. But I mean, it really speaks to me, though. This book is, as he does in these essays in this nonfiction book, it really speaks to me, though.
Is it a nonfiction?
It's nonfiction. It's nonfiction. It's a series of essays about writing. Yeah, Zen and the Art of Writing.
Got you. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And his writing, I've not read a lot of Ray Bradbury's stories, but his writing style is kind of incredible in this nonfiction. So I'd say people definitely check that out. Even if you're not going to agree with everything he's going to talk about, it's kind of like on writing, like a Stephen King kind of thing. That it's a fun book, even if you're not going to agree with all the lessons that he's trying to teach in it.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely check that out. I think anybody who will take the time to break down writing and one, how you can do it better, and 2, the joy of it, definitely.
The other fascinating thing I noticed about this book is how Bradbury will talk about his family, specifically his father so far. I haven't finished the book yet, but in a number of his essays, he'll talk about his father. And Bradbury was born in like 1920, so he was around for a while. He passed in the early 2000s, or before 2010, I think. But,
oh my goodness, yeah,
he lived a long life, and then you put in perspective.
So much in that time. I mean, you think about
exactly.
it. He saw so much.
Incredible, and the thing is, but then his father was like. Running, he tells stories about that his father would tell him at points, and one of them was like about how he'd run away to the west, like during the Nevada Gold Rush or something. Like there's a lot going on here, but it also goes to show how little time really encompasses American history, and I think that's really fascinating. So I wanted to mention that because there's a perspective that you get from reading somebody who was almost a century old. And then go back another century, and boom, we're in the 1850s or whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, and you think just about like the span of time that man lived in, how many major events he saw. I mean, I can't remember the year that the Great Depression was off the top of my head, but he saw World
he
War
grew
II
up during that. He grew up in it. World War II was right after it, and then. Yeah, it was right in the middle of it. He would have been coming of age about the time World War II started. Yeah,
right. That's crazy.
Yeah,
but you said it's called The Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury.
Zen and the Art of Writing. Yeah, so it's like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but writing.
I got you. That's
yeah.
Good.
I think it is play off on that other title. Yeah. So anyway, that's my recommendations for this week. Anyway, Nicole Fanning, thank you for being on the show. It's been a ton of fun, and tell people where they can find your books and and your website or whatever. Anything you've got online that you want to point
whatever
to.
I got online. So my website is nherownwords.com. So N is in Nicole, herownwords.com. And you can find my books on Amazon and Kindle. And they are under my name, Nicole Fanning. And I'm also on TikTok as Nicole Fanning. So that's where I'm at. I mean, I'm starting my Instagram. I really have like a personal Instagram. That's really just a lot of videos of my dog and food that I've cooked. So I'm sure nobody's interested in that.
Yeah, don't go there. Don't try to find that.
You don't want to go there. No,
you're just gonna see a dog, probably an adorable dog, but whatever.
Definitely. But yeah, that's TikTok. You can find me on Facebook as well. Facebook Nicole Fanning. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. This has been a blast.
Oh, you're very welcome, and it's been likewise, right back at you. Because as for this podcast, here's the part where I go into my plugs. You can find more of us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books on Amazon.com under Tim Niederreiter, not Timothy. Some people get mixed up with that. And also the last name Niederreiter, the I goes before the E. So,
and didn't you say you have a book right now that is...
Yeah, I have actually a number of books. Well, it won't be free when this episode comes out, unfortunately. But Demon's Scroll was free earlier in September, and this will be coming out probably either early October or before that. Yeah, I don't know exactly when the episode drops because I'm not used to having a buffer.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, I didn't have a buffer all year, and now I have one. So it's kind of, the peek behind the curtain, folks.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so definitely you'll be able to find the Twisted God series. I mentioned those books earlier. The first book is The Forgotten Mask. The second book should be out by now, Beloved of Death. And there might be a third one out, but that would be Time's Needle. Just look for that. They'll all be on the same series page. If they're all, whatever's out, you'll find it there. Twisted Gods on Amazon.com. Also, Demon Scroll is out on Amazon.com, and there's a number of other books in that series too. Demon Hunter series. Yeah, just check out all my books. Just go to my author page. There's a lot of books there. You'll find something you like. There's quite a variety, I'm told. So, if you like sci-fi fantasy, check that shit. Check that shit out. Anyway,
I like it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks once again, Nicole Fanning, and have a good week. Stay safe out there, folks. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That tears it.